Hey friends, Todd Chipman here, Dean of Graduate Studies, Associate Professor of Biblical Studies at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. Today we recognize 182 years ago the death of Robert Murray M'Cheyne. I'm holding here Andrew Bonar's volume on M'Cheyne. He was a friend of M'Cheyne's, and in this book chat I want to think just a bit about M'Cheyne's life and Bonar's volume here. We're so indebted that we have this volume because it's a lot of what we have about M'Cheyne's life and the details of it. In his early 20s, he was training for ministry, got called to a church in Dundee in Scotland, St. Peter's, and the Lord blessed his work. He only lived until his 29th year. He was 29 years old when he died. And in 1843, early that year, he had suffered along the way because of illness that was across Scotland at the time, typhus, and he was diseased and ultimately went to be with the Lord as a young man at 29, had less than a decade of ministry in Scotland, but had a profound effect. He was a man of the word. He studied diligently. He sought to preach fervently, and God blessed. Many people came to Christ through his ministry. But he was also a man of great visitation. He labored to visit people, to evangelize personally, as well as to preach fervently. He was a man who was committed to training his people in the word. Now, what we need to understand, it was March 1843 when he passed away. Early that year, he was sick, and on his bed, not his deathbed, but he was confined and he was ill on his bed, he put together a Bible reading plan that is still in use today. If you have used D.A. Carson's For the Love of God, it's a 2-volume small commentary set, and it is a commentary on M'Cheyne's Bible reading plan. M'Cheyne arranged this plan for folks to read some in the Old Testament, some in the New Testament, and Psalms and Proverbs every day. If you followed his plan through the year, you would get through the Old Testament once, the New Testament, and Psalms and Proverbs twice every year. And it's just a fantastic reading plan, and Carson's volumes. It was instrumental in me composing Scripture Storyline and my reading plan. I was using M'Cheyne's plan, enjoying it, but reading in so many different places every day was sometimes a challenge for me to get context and for my own church. And so I set out in 2007 to fervently put together a reading calendar, and then inspired by Carson, did some devotionals along the way, and that became Scripture Storyline. And I use it today. Some folks in my church, I use it in classes. It's an invitation to biblical theology, seeing chunks of Scripture in their context in larger units. But I still go back and look at Carson's work and think about M'Cheyne and his desire to preach, his desire to visit, and to be a pastor who was a man of the word and wanted his church to be people of the word, and he labored toward that. One last recommendation before we go. Dr. Michael McMullen, colleague here at MBTS, his edited sermons here of M'Cheyne that he has put out for us, previously unpublished, a great resource to get to M'Cheyne's heart for preaching. Much more could be said about this man. In his early 20s, became a pastor, less than a decade of pastoral ministry. 182 years later, we are still using some of his resources. May God cast a long shadow from our lives as well. For more book chats, go to biblicalstudiestoday.com. For more information on biblical studies resources to study church history with people like Michael McMullen, come to MBTS. Go to mbts.edu for more information on our classes. See you again next time.